One. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Childcare Director Share podcast. We are so excited that we have Dominique Savage from Educated Mindz with us today. If you watch YouTube, you probably already have subscribed to our channel. And if you haven't, subscribe today, right after this episode. We are going to talk about something that we both believe in so much. We really want to talk about the power of staying small and how not to scale up in a way that doesn't protect your childcare brand, because sometimes you will think, bigger is better, and it isn't always. Now, it could be for your brand, but we want you to make sure that you consider all of the things that you need to consider before you open up your next childcare center. So, welcome to the podcast, Dominic.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited to be on your podcast. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you for having me before we jump into any conversations, because it's such a dear and near topic to my heart and so to yours. So I'm super excited just to talk about it and really enlighten everyone, and just like really share the true rawness of that space that we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much
Yes, yeah.
for having me.
So I think, when you look on social media, everybody's telling you, like, you got to level up, you got to grow, you got to expand, you got to do all these things. So the first thing I want you to know is, if you say, what's wrong with me? Why don't I want to do all that? There's nothing wrong with you. It's okay to feel really good in the space that you're in.
hmm
Sometimes I'll say to my staff, I'm like, my goal was never to be the biggest. It was always to be the best. And so I feel like she's like, yeah, let's talk about that right now. But I feel like that is just something that I think a message that people need to hear. And those of you who have stayed small and stayed with your eye on the pulse, are doing okay right now. And those centers that are really big with, large spaces, you may be really struggling as, the industry is changing. So, yeah. So, why don't you talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
Absolutely. You hit it right on the nose. So my name's Dominique E Savage. I'm a child care provider first, and then a child care consultant and author in the business of Educated Mindz. And so I love to classify myself. I never love to take all the credit. I love to call myself a second generation child care owner, in that space, because my mom started the childcare business when I was 3 years old with my father, and we've kind of grown and expand from there. So we were very much family based for about the first 7 or 8 or 9 years. And after graduating college, doing all the things, then I joined into the family business in that space, and we've grown commercially. That is, and so I think, just hitting it right on the nose is that I think one of the biggest things, and you hit it, you said, is that, and I was that person, right? So I'm going to be so very honest. I'm going to be so very transparent. We are recording this in 2025. In 2012, I joined into the childcare business, and by 2016, we have 4 separate commercial childcare center locations. Okay. In my early 20s, I was very much, my mom and I, like, we think the more the better. The more, the bigger the brand, the more, all of the things that you see, like, oh, I'm full now, let me get the next one. And what I realized in those trials and tribulations is that that's not always true. I just always say that you have to really know and make sure that the first system and the first location, or any location, is a well-oiled machine without you. Okay. An extreme well-oiled machine, not that a well-oiled machine that you got staff and you solid for 45 days or even 6 months. I'm saying like a well-oiled machine. If teachers call out, if people quit, if you're not your director, any of those things, it can still operate in the midst of a storm, because storms are going to happen when you have multiple locations. And sometimes when you have multiple locations, one of the reasons why we decided to scale back down and maximize the size that we actually have is a financial deficit, and quality, the level of quality, drops. You have to choose. And then the most important part of when you want to become a CEO in any business or any entrepreneurship, the freedom's not there. If all of the machines aren't oiled well for them to operate without you in place.
Oh, girl, yes. All those things. So, my sister and I have opened up 6 centers and a dance studio.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think, you touched on the resources and the people resources, but also the financial resources, because you can have two or three centers really doing well and making a profit. But if you have a couple centers that are not, they're, especially if they operate as one
Mhm.
company, which that's
Yeah.
how we operate it, as one company, one brand. They'll suck all the energy and the life out of the other ones. All the profit you're making at three centers, you're paying for another center. And I always tell people I have no ego when it comes around to that. I was like, this center is not making us money. Bye. Like,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, because it can really not just take a toll on your people, but also your finances.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that ego, right?
Yeah.
That's like such a big thing. And for me, in that space, that 26-year-old, it was like, oh my God, I invested this money in these other two locations. I'm still paying off loans from these other two locations. You telling me now that I'm going to like stop it and shut it down? And I was just like, no, Dominique. My mom and I, it wasn't just never us. It was both of us together. And at that time, she was just like, the numbers aren't numbering. The math isn't math and the freedom isn't there. And we had already put like a solid 12 years in the game before two
Hmm.
more locations. So it's like, you're supposed to grow, but not take away,
Yeah.
And so I had to check my Shigo, as I love to call it. I had to check my Shigo and realize like that was a true business learning lesson for me, that is not about like what looks good and what seems good. You can see people and they're like, hey, I see you guys are doing your thing. You guys got 4, 5, 6 locations. And you're like, yeah, but behind the scenes, you're struggling.
Mm-hmm. That for sure, for sure. And I think it was almost a blessing because before COVID hit, we were down to three. And I just said to myself, I could not even imagine trying to run 600 during that. Like, that was a blessing that I was already like, we just need to
Ahead of the
focus
curve.
on. Yeah, we were ahead for sure. I think one of the things too that I love, I'm Italian by culture, and I love people. I'm such a heart centered leader that for me, the first indicator was even before the financial. I feel like I started to lose that personal touch with families and staff, and I felt like my brand started to get a little diluted.
Hmm.
And so that didn't feel good to me. And so that was really my first indicator. Was I was always so proud to be like, I know all my families, all my staff, all my kids,
Hmm.
and that became really difficult. And our six centers were all in the same city. I have
Yeah.
I have three on the same road. I'm like a Dunkin'
Yes.
Donuts. But that is a secret, guys. I'm gonna tell you right now. That is a secret for building a brand. Like, if you fill a center and it feels good and it's easy, like, there is just logistical advantages when they're like next to each other. You can be there
Other.
in a minute if there's right. We're
Yes.
telling the truth. This is the truth, right?
Yes. Yes.
You can be
Yes.
there really quick if there's an emergency. Yeah, and you can be at multiple locations in the same day. I might open at one school, say hi to everybody, be the greeter, and then afternoon I'm at the other school, right?
That's my
And
flow.
and people see you every day. You are
Yes.
connected. Yeah, yeah. So, is there anything before I move on to the next part? Is there anything there that I
Oh,
didn't cover?
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. So it was about like 2008. At this point, I was kind of like graduating high school. And so we had that family childcare program for well over 9 years since I was three. At this point, I'm like 17 now.
Mm,
And so my mom was very adamant, like, no, I want to get a location that's in the vicinity because you've built up your families, you've built up your wait list. I think all the things that's going on now with social media, website, I wasn't coming from that era, right? And
mhm,
so she was very adamant. And even if I couldn't find it like right in the quarter, so I'm from Philly, and so it's very busy. It's very avenues. It's all the things. It's high traffic, and so even if she couldn't find a location right there, like walking distance, she's like, I don't want to go to a whole nother side of Philly. Right, like, so if
mhm,
I'm in North Philly, I don't want to go all the way to West Philly because you're literally like rebuilding your name. People know you by. We have generations that come back just because the name is Yolanda. You know,
mhm,
they
mhm.
could be like, "Dang, she's still there when they driving past." And so having multiple centers, when we did branch out, at this point, it was like we're going to do the do and get 4 locations. All of our locations were two. It was four, but two were on the same avenue, and the other two were on the same avenue. And it allowed at that time. Our thought process was one center is going to be toddlers, one center is going to be school agers, like breaking it down so it could be more organized. But you were exactly right. Even now with the 2 locations that we still have, we own those buildings. And so, like you said, we can be like, okay, I'm going to do morning, because I think your presence as an owner and just as an educator. So I was once a kindergarten teacher prior to this childcare world. And I think that just your presence as an owner, I always say, like, our motto is, and I always tell our staff this, is that we are small, but we are mighty, and we are quality. And one of the biggest things that I say is that, like, things can happen like this. A child can have to get rushed to the emergency room, accidents, inspections, pops inspections, all the things. So being in, like, drivable distance is super great. Another benefit is, like, we have families that's like, okay, well, I want my child to go to this location, but I'm full, but the bus is in distance between both locations. So I'm still picking up multiple families on different sides of, quote unquote, the neighborhood, because the bus runs between both locations. And because they want to stay within our community and our family and our quality, they will catch the bus to get to the other location if that location is full. So being close in proximity is a great, it's a great marketing technique. Sometimes it feels like you're taking over the ad. And it also is a great technique just to be able to spread yourself out in that space, with families when you do get full.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, yeah. So for those of you who are thinking to add another center, right now, the things we're telling you, we're not in the same state. These are things that work no matter what state you're in. I'm telling you right now, this is how you do it if you are going to open up. But, and the other nice thing too is we're also a family run business. It's myself, my sister, my niece works here, my nephew works here, my daughter works here. You are my daughter, 100%. She is a boss of one of my locations. She's a director, literally one of the best directors that I've ever seen. Not because she's my kid,
My
just
daughter.
she grew up. She grew up like you. She's been in that building since she was 6 months old, and now, I mean, she's 26, so she's lived her whole life in that building. So we talked about, smaller groups allows for higher standards. We talked about logistics being closer together. What about, let's focus on, you're able to focus on what you love. Like how staying small can really help give you time to focus on things that truly matter, like working with your kids, building those relationships, fostering positive environments. And and ditching the stress of constantly always having to put out fires, right? Spending less time on those operational struggles, which allows us to have more of a hands-on approach and connect with your vision and your mission. Like I love going in rooms and doing observations, but I feel like not just to like observe to you support the teacher, of course that is especially important, but also to be like, am I delivering what I promise? And can we do more? Like how can we really do more to support children's learning or support what's going on in our community? The other day I was talking to one of the teachers and I was like, hey, I feel like we're very community oriented. I'm like, I feel like we haven't done any community stuff this month. I was like, they were talking about kindness and friendship. I was like, can we get on making some cards for the local nursing home next door? And she's like, yeah, I'm on it. But it was just, being present, you can really keep your finger on, like, are we fulfilling our vision? Are we fulfilling our mission? And this is beyond making money, right? Because we are a very heart-centered industry and a trust industry. What are some of the things you love most about that you're able to focus on?
I think in this space now, so I'm like almost 100% admin. I call myself at this point like on site, off site, but I'm nowhere near on site to the way that I used to be. So we've learned like our lanes and our roles, because the more that you get different programs in your business, the more that you focus on operations and build those operations, then they require a different set of eyes. So I'm that set of eyes. And I always call my mom, she is the mother hubber. She is that boots on the ground. She's the one that's in the building. She's the one that can see. And so in the beginning stages of the business, I would say for me, I was a director in that building day in and day out for 11 years straight. And so I think being small at that time, even having the 2 locations, the first thing I would say is it really allowed me to first see what the teachers are experiencing. right? So I gotta do that first, because before you can want to do all these other things, it's really what goes on in that classroom. Because you could type up all the wonderful paperwork, but if what's going on in there is not matching what's on paper, there's a disconnect somewhere. And so I think being in the teacher space first, it allowed me to really see, it allowed me to hear, and it allowed me to understand. I think a lot of the supervision things that were going on, if I had 6, 7, 8, 9 classrooms, in one classroom I'd have always been short and I always was missing a teacher over here, I wouldn't have really been able to be engrossed into the classrooms. In those classrooms, I was able to see by being a smaller site. I truly believe so. So one of our sites are 20 and our other site is 35. And so I think by just having 2 floors or 1 or 2 classrooms in those buildings overall, I was able to see and hear things that I wouldn't have been able to see and hear. I was also able to make changes. So like we had a daily schedule, right? And I'm like, okay, the schedule's working, but something's not right. But if I was in the office, or I was always running in between multiple locations because I'm putting out those fires, I wouldn't have been able to see it. A teacher's not going to say like, hey, we have playtime for an hour. I think we should cut it down to 45 minutes. Hey, we have small group over here, but I see that the children really need to go outside and get that energy out before we have them sit back down. Like I was able to see what was going on in the classrooms to make sure that the classrooms were operating out of quality and operating out of excellence, before we're now trying to show up just to show up on paper for all these accreditation programs and all these other things. So I would say like that's one of the things that I was really able to see as a smaller site. And then as we grew into that space, I remember one of the things I just was in college, it was like, okay, my mom has this family childcare program. She's at home. She's getting it out the mud. We got, the ground floor, our living room and dining room became, childcare. And so I seen her really giving her all. But my mission was like, how can I take what she's already doing and expand it? How can I get 6-figure grants? How can I qualify for programs without going big? Right? Yeah. And so now that we're in that space, being small, I was able to like really work on operations during the day, right? Not working on operations or applying for grants or going to meetings or any of those things. I was able to hire the extra staff that I needed that still fit in my budget for us to be able to make a profit, and then get out there and be the face, go to community meetings, sit on board in the elementary schools, like things of that capacity. I wouldn't have been able to continuously do that, at least for us. I can't speak for everybody. But I'm just saying for us, and she was so adamant, like, no, we're keeping the family feel. We're keeping the family feel in the commercial space, but how can we grow this business? Because we realized 4 locations meant we weren't maximizing the current capacity that we had. We thought maximizing capacity was, oh, you got 35 for license, we should get 35 children, right? We weren't thinking about shifts. We weren't thinking about funding streams. We weren't thinking about how to work smarter, not harder. Like, we weren't thinking that. We were just thinking like, oh, this is the capacity. This is how many children I can have. Let me try to market for this 1 or 2 demographics, and that's it. And so I think I love the space of being small, because literally just before this podcast, I had a gentleman call the center looking for my mom. He's like, hey, can I speak to Miss Shalonda? And I'm like, yeah, I can help you. He's like, is this Miss Dominique? I said, now I know. I'm getting the feel that you already know who I am. He said, I went there. I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 18. Mm-hmm. And I said, like, those are the moments. Like, you can have the second generations, you can have the 3 or 4, but when the child comes back themselves, when you have a 8th grader or a child is graduating college and a parent sends you pictures randomly, or they still find you, I mean, like, those are the core things that cannot mix up. I call them priceless. Like, yes, it's wonderful to operate a thriving, profitable childcare program, but we stay in the industry when it's not profitable, right? And when it is hard, for those moments that you can walk into a room and like the children, you can have the worst day and the children will light you up. A parent, I think so many times is like, we talk about having all the community resources for our families, but sometimes the parents just need a voice. They just need an ear. I mean, like, I always tell my mom, like, I think I'm going to add therapists on your title, because she always makes like the women we work in a low income community, and so like I mean the things that they deal with and things that they struggle with are things that we don't see on the media, are things that we
Hmm.
don't see people talking about and coaching about, and that comes from character within, you know, and you can get that when you keep that, not necessarily family, but just like I love when I go to a restaurant and I can tell that this is, like you said, you're Italian. I can tell when this is like, oh no, that must be the daughter.
It
That
is.
must be the, you know, I'm like, I'm ordering extra, I'm tipping extra because I know the challenges and the struggles.
Yeah. Wow, it's so many good pieces that you said there. And I've been doing this a very long time. I am now in year 26. I
Wow.
have students of my former students, their children. That's
Mm.
how long I've been doing this. Um, and I've had students that have worked for me, uh, that have been with me for years and years and years. So you're right; those things are extremely priceless. Um, let's talk about high quality staff. Let's talk about that for a minute because people have a hard time with that, right?
Hmm.
I'm going to go with when you're a smaller program, I'm going to say it, we have less problems keeping our staff,
I agree.
right? And that is because of that personal, individualized attention. Just like you said, like when
Hmm.
teachers like, oh, the schedule's really not working that great. You're there, you're accessible, you help solve those problems right away for them or
Hmm.
with them, not before them,
Hmm.
but with them, and then they feel heard and they feel seen. And I think that and I just know from my personal experience, and I'm not, again, I've been there when I had, for me, my sweet spot is like 40 staff. And
Hmm.
once I start hitting over 40 staff, I feel like that's when it's time to get the fire trucks.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their own capacity, their own number.
Yeah.
Some people might be like, no, that's too many. Um, but yeah, I mean the relationships that you make with your team, especially over periods of time, just like
Hmm.
you said with students, but it's the same with your team members. When my mom was passing in 2019, several of my staff were there in the room, so if that like just
Very
speaks to the
touching.
level of closeness that we had
Hmm.
with our team. And then for those 3 days, because she was in hospice for like 3 days before she passed, we didn't get a phone call. It was like it was on. They were like they closed
Yeah.
off the world for us. I guess that would be the way. And every single thing at that center ran smooth as butter. They made sure of it. They were on triple time. They were on triple time to make sure that, everything that could be avoidable was. And so I feel like you just get this such a close knit richness that you just can't duplicate. And that's something you don't see on a spreadsheet. It's
Hmm.
not something you're going to see a social media post about in most cases, right? Nobody's standing in front of the new, Lexus car they just bought talking about these things. But they're
Hmm.
things that I just want you to know for the listeners that are out there. If you have one center and you're like, okay, I've got the money, I've got the capacity, we can move and get a second center. We just want you to be cautious and just think about not only what you'll gain, but some of the things that you might lose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that for me is the staffing was such a, it was a challenge, even being as small as we were, right? And I think one of the biggest misconceptions, and I think one of the biggest things that small childcare providers have to learn, Ms. Dom included, I was no different. I think one of the biggest things that I had to learn is that when we had like the one center, it was like relationships were there, right? But I think that the more centers that I began to get and the more centers that we had, I totally jumped out there. My mom and I, she will attest to this if she sees this or when she sees this. She will attest to this that it was leadership that was extremely lacking in the owners, right? So I was able to get multiple locations and I was keeping staff, but I wasn't able to redirect properly. I wasn't able to speak properly. My onboardings were terrible. I mean, like all my the whole onboarding system, like what is that? Right? I didn't even that was not even a thing. It was like I need you. Let's go. Let's get in here.
Yeah.
We're there. And I think that for us, I would say that it was such a hard challenge keeping staff. One, because sometimes and it could be just where I'm at. But sometimes the smaller you are, the lower expectation that sometimes the teachers have coming into the your childcare center, right? Because I'm small, but we're still operating out of excellence. We're still operating out of STAR for accreditations. These are requirements that we must
Mm-hmm.
maintain. It don't matter whether it's 10 kids in here or 25 children in here. You must do it like this, and this. And I think that we struggle with the view and how people viewed the center because it looked small, that this is like a babysitting service, or this is going to be an easy peasy job. So we had to go back to the space of, we took leadership classes, we enrolled in director credential courses. I went back and got my master's degree in educational leadership,
Yep.
specifically because I was struggling with, one, being a 21-year-old owner and boss, and trying to, teach people that are older than me, younger than me. Like, I was struggling in that level of professionalism, but I also was struggling in what makes a great leader. My mindset was not on others. My mindset was on self. My mindset was on what can they do to help us get better, easier, and faster. It wasn't on, well, how does this person learn, and what ways do I
Mm-hmm.
got to show them? And okay, this person is a visual, so I got to really get in there, or I got to really, I wasn't thinking none of that. I was thinking, like, this is an empty classroom. We need teachers. I'm trying to get to the next space. Look at this money. Let's meet with it. Like, I wasn't thinking leadership. And so in that space of understanding what makes a great leader, we begin to realize, like, hey, we need to shift leadership. We need to shift appreciation. There's a way to redirect, but how do you redirect? When do you redirect? Is it documented? Like, all of these things. And I think that us partnering with other funding streams and getting like those Head Start programs and things in our business really challenged me to level up, because you can get accreditation. That's only what's on the binder, and that's only what's on the book when they come out once a year, twice a year. But those programs that you get in your business, they are making sure that you are truly operating out of excellence on a monthly basis, because they coming out, they visiting,
Mm-hmm.
they see your interaction with your teachers. And so I think that for us with small, I had to make our business show up online more professional for us personally, our struggle. I also had to show up and figure out, okay, how do I hire staff in bulk? Right? How do I train staff in bulk? Right?
Mm-hmm.
How do I realize, it's not good enough just to put somebody on your training videos, but I ain't giving them no classroom training. So for us being small, it was the view that it's like, oh, you got a daycare, but it still looks like a babysitting service. But by perception, because when someone goes on your website, someone goes on your Instagram, someone seeing the job post, they're interviewing you too. And so
Yeah.
now they're looking like, okay, this is a small site, but it looks like it's a wonderful center to be a part of. It looks like it's teamwork. It looks like it's great morale. All of those things that go into it. And those were things that I was not aware of, or I just didn't think was like a big deal. It was like in the back. And then the more we started losing staff and having high turnover and getting large stacks of W-2s in the mail, we were like, wait, we know that, yes, they need some fixes too, but it genuinely starts from leadership on down.
Yeah. Wow. I hope y'all listening. You have graduated, girl. You have graduated. Yes, all of those things. Super insightful. You know what? One of the things that you had said a couple of times here or there about funding streams. I want to talk about that right now because that's a big topic right now,
Yeah.
especially for our nonprofit centers out there where
Yes.
money was just kind of halted, right? You said Head Start, that money is halted right now. Um, I think that it's really important when you're being strategic for your business that you have multiple streams of income,
Mm-hmm.
multiple, because if you don't, you are at the mercy of other people. You can have the best quality, awesomest center ever, and if it's entirely funded by the government or a
Mm-hmm.
grant, and they stop that grant, you're done.
Done,
If
done.
you're done, no matter how good you are.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see that. We're gonna see, I'm not political at all. I'm just saying, if there's no money, whether you're for profit or not profit, if there's no money, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So What are some of the ways that you have brought in other funds into your program? How like do you have some like grant money, private pay? Like talk to us a little bit about how you mix up your funding streams.
So one of the things that we've learned in our accounting space is that like you really want to diversify your income. So obviously, when you first get started, like to all of my aspiring childcare providers out there, the first thing you're gonna lock in is on private pay. Like that's
Hmm.
without a given. That's easy. You got that game flowing. But I think that we were one of those programs that only had private pay and only had subsidy. Right, subsidy is like
Hmm.
a nationwide thing. So
Sure.
we only had those programs. But what we realized is if parents aren't working for the subsidy programs that's a requirement for them to maintain that subsidy, at least where we are located, then it's not even about the government losing their overall funding. That's a whole new topic that
Yeah, yeah.
dropped on everybody like a bomb, right? But in general, I think we realize parents aren't working where they're losing their funding because they're not working. So we're
Hmm.
seeing the mercy of that. And so I think we wanted to really realize you should one see what programs outside of your private pay and outside of your subsidy, because those are like your basics, those are your main two.
Hmm.
What other programs work well for your business model, right? Every single funding stream may or may not work well for your business model. And I say that because a lot of times I see so many of our clients in our Educated Mind space that want to like grow or they want to get other funding streams, but because their center is so large or their center is so small, or because the owner themselves don't have the credentials, right, to fill those positions, they can't afford to pay a teacher with a bachelor's degree many times because now they're competing with the school district, right?
Yep.
And a lot of those programs require you to have lead teachers with
Hmm.
bachelor's degrees in this or associate's degrees in that,
Hmm.
and so forth. And so one of the things I would always tell a child care provider is, my mom instilled in me the big thing of education. Like, get your education. Can't no one take that away from you. That's like what 101.
Right.
And I say that to say some people will be like, oh, I'm too old to go back to school. My mom and I was on college campus for 3 years straight together. We were in classes together, in diners
Yeah.
together. I was in community college sitting in the back when I was 9 years old while she was getting her degree as a mother and as a widow. And so it's doable, right?
Yeah.
And if this is your industry, like if you're here to stay, if this is
Hmm.
your bread and butter, and this is how you make a livelihood, you want to, no matter what your age is, get some credits, get something under your belt, because when it's time to fill out those grants and it's time to apply for those
Hmm.
programs, they want to see that you already have the people in place. It's
Hmm.
not that their program is going to come in and take over your business. Sometimes it can, based on how the model works for your
Hmm.
business, but they want to see that you're already operating like this, right? Their funding is just to help elevate that with supplies and teachers and curriculums and assessments
Hmm.
and all that. But they want to see that you're already operating out of excellence with half of the
Hmm.
teachers having CDAs or these things like that. And so I would say when it comes to funding streams, see what model works well for your type of business, how much you want of it to take up your business. So if you have, let's say, 25 capacity, you might not want all 25 at the mercy of that one grant, right?
Yeah.
Stick with a solid 10. Stick with your minimum ratio. So if your minimum ratio, like
Yep.
ours is preschoolers, is one teacher to 10 children, start out with 10. Don't
Hmm.
jump out there and get 20 and 30 and everything else. You know
Hmm.
why? Because another responsibility that comes with that is funding and financial literacy. I
Yeah.
cannot stress to you enough. I've been through like 3 audits. The first one I cried and died and came back to life. Okay, um, you gotta really you gotta understand money. You gotta understand business.
Yeah.
You gotta understand banking, and you really have to be like aware. And a lot of times we see programs grabbing these grants and grabbing these things, and now it's time for a yellow book audit, and they have absolutely no idea. They
Yeah.
just got a bookkeeper and that's it.
Yeah.
So I would say when you're thinking about funding stream, never let a funding stream take over your 100% capacity, because as you
Hmm.
said, you're at the mercy. Try to mix it up, but what works well for you. And another great thing is that a lot of the funding streams allow for smaller programs, if you get awarded the slots, to have multiple shifts.
Hmm.
And that's how you maximize your space with
Hmm.
smaller capacities with shifts. right? So you got, sometimes you got we have we don't have Head Start, we have pre-K, our city
Yeah.
funded pre-K. And so they
Yep.
may come in at 8 to 2, 8 to 2:30. Now I got
Hmm.
another shift.
You girl, this is why your YouTube channel is so great and blows up. So yes, all of those things. And the other thing too is don't be afraid, because I do hear a lot of people talking about they're losing their kids to state funded pre-K. Okay, so school gets out at 11 o'clock or 3 o'clock, or for wraparound care, or for
Yes.
before school, after school. There's so many ways to bring in additional funds into your program beyond the
Mm-hmm.
traditional setting of, one parent drops off, they pay you and they pick up and that's it. Also, if you're providing food and you're not part of the food program, you might want to consider that. So there's
Yes.
a lot, yeah, there's lots of things in terms of money that can come in, partner with local businesses, especially if you have a large business next to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we could go on and on. We could probably fill a show for like a whole day. So we won't do that. So what we want you to know before we wrap up is what we want you to know is just be strategic before you open up another center.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure it's in your best mindset, your best for your family, that is best for your employees, that is best for your budget, it's best for your community, and think about all the things that you can benefit from, but also some of the things that you might lose. Before we wrap up, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to leave folks with?
I think for this example and for this topic is so like near and dear. One of the things I want to say is that I want to leave people with is do not be afraid of your numbers. Okay. We are in business to make money, but we are also in business to educate our minds on finances. It is no one else's job but yours to understand what's going on financially in your business. And I'm not talking about when you log into your online banking. Okay. If you are solely thinking about expanding or get another location, we talked about all the things to consider, but really look at your previous 2 years of business. When you jump out there and get another location, I'm just a big firm advocate for ownership. If this is what you're doing and this is where
Hmm.
you're gonna be and this is your career, own a building.
Yep.
It gives you so much leverage, so much retirement things to look into, so much equity. Take your time. Just because you got one location and maybe you're leasing that building, maybe your next goal is how can I position my business financially
Hmm.
to then be in position to get a building, right? Negotiate those terms. Never try to pay off someone's whole mortgage on a commercial. So those are things that I say is that look at the numbers. I think the numbers, when you look at it on paper, will really give you a clear understanding and more confidence in your heart and what is the next direction to go in outside of this is it. Like we're doing this. We've been getting a lot of kids for the past year and it's
Hmm.
time to pivot. It's time to go next. Really look at the full scope and what
Yes.
your overall vision and mission is for your organization, not just for like you in your pockets.
Yeah. Yes. So, with love to everybody who's listening, with much respect, because we know it is challenging to own a child care center right now, but also super rewarding, and we can't give up on our kids and our communities. So, we're here for the long haul for sure. Dominic, tell folks where they can find you.
Yes, yes, definitely, guys. Always tap in on me, www.educatedminds.com. You can find me on there for all of our websites, our startup options and courses and programs. Definitely on the YouTube channel, guys. I love to drop free gems and talk about all this great good stuff. So my YouTube channel is Educated Minds, and all of the handles are the same: Educated Minds, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff. Head to the website and you can connect everything from there.
Thank you so much for being an amazing guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Of
having me.
of course, and for you that are listening out there, remember it's the small details that make a big impact on the success of your childcare business. Have a great day.